stick together. Think about the children and the generation.
and concentrate. Come, let us sit and try to relate. Because now, more than ever, we must show discipline, tolerance, and production to build a strong and better nation. I say that is the main foundation. So come, let us work hand in hand, because this is our land. Come, my brother, come, my sister, and let us build a nation together. Oh, yeah. Remember, the key to success is working hard. For our country we must have regard. Forget all your differences, let we start to build. And onward to progress we surely will. Because now, more than ever, we must show discipline, tolerance, and production to build a strong and better nation. I say that is the main foundation. So come, let us work hand in hand, because this is our land. Come, my brother, come, my sister, and let us build a nation together. So much of things that we need to see about. Surely I do have to spell them out. 'Cause you know as well as I do, the only way is putting more effort and less play. Because now, more than ever, we must show discipline, tolerance, and production to build a strong and better nation. I say that is the main foundation. So come, let us work hand in hand, because this is our land. Come, my brother.
morning, ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago who are joining us live on the World Wide Web, social media platforms. Special good morning to my colleague, Senator Al-Rawi, as well as Dr. Senator Amery Browne. First, let me ask for the excuse of the honorable political leader and leader of the opposition from today's news conference. As you're aware, that she has suffered the sudden death of her brother. And yesterday is was the funeral rather. And so she's still with her family trying to recover from this sudden death. So today, this morning rather, we want to continue to send our prayers and best wishes to the Honorable Penny Beckles Robinson, leader of the opposition, to both to her and her family, and to assure her that she continues to be in our prayers and as well as our support. We have decided to call this news conference today to respond to some issues that have been placed in the national domain coming out of Monday night, should I say Monday night forum, UNC forum, where the Prime Minister and some of our colleagues would have raised certain issues that require the immediate response of the PNM opposition to state our position where these matters are concerned. MP Kareem Marcelle was due to attend this morning's news conference, and I had to take his position this morning because he's currently attending court on a very important issue with respect to CPEP. His responsibility this morning was to give an update to the national community on the legal action that the opposition has launched against CPEP in defense of over 11,000 workers who have lost their job as a result of the arbitrary termination, the wicked arbitrary termination of over 300 contractors employed with CPEP, and obviously resulting in over 11,000 people without a job. As you know, the opposition has provided legal support to the contractors as well as to the 11,000 employees who are now placed on the breadline as a result of this action by the government. And you would have seen in the national newspapers and some commentators from the government side that over the weekend, the court dismissed the matter, and that would have placed a lot of people, allowed a lot of people to be quite concerned with respect to what really transpired. Mr. Kareem Marcelle and the opposition would have clarified on subsequent information that that has not been the case. Based on an administrative issue, a decision was taken by the legal team to withdraw the claim and to have it refiled. So by way of an update, I can advise you that a new claim was in fact filed. A pre-action protocol letter was issued to CPEP, and they were given 24 hours to rescind the termination letters that were issued to the over 300 contractors. They have not complied, and as a result of that, our legal team filed action against CPEP over the weekend. And quite fortunately, we were able to get a judge to hear the urgent matter this morning. So the latest information I have is that the matter is scheduled to be heard by a High Court judge at 11 a.m. this morning, where we are seeking injunctive relief against CPEP so that the government can be prevented from pursuing its actions against the 300 contractors and placing over 11,000 citizens on the breadline. So we expect to hear the outcome. We look forward to the outcome of the proceedings, but just to let you know that the matter was refiled. The matter will be heard this morning with respect to the injunctive relief. At 11 o'clock, our attorneys will be arguing this matter. So we look forward to the outcome of the hearing later on today. You would have seen some commentators on the part of the government literally rejoicing that the matter was dismissed. And, you know, I was taken aback by that because This is just not a legal issue. This is a bread and butter issue for over 11,000 of our citizens. And to see government ministers celebrating what they thought was the dismissal of these proceedings, not recognizing that this is bread and butter issues for 11,000 of our citizens. And then I saw another government minister in the Ministry of Housing on a Facebook post saying that the PNM is defending ghost workers in CPEP. I mean, these are the kind of callous and irresponsible statements that we are hearing from leaders in the government, describing hard-working citizens as ghost workers, and what the PNM is doing is defending ghost workers and what have you. I believe that that is very unfortunate. And when you have leaders of the government, members of the cabinet, conducting themselves in the way that they are conducting themselves, it leaves much to be desired. And my advice again to the ministers of government, to let them know that you are no longer in opposition, you are holding public office, and you're expected to conduct yourself as ministers of government, taking responsibility for your oath of office, and that is not the way in which you conduct yourself. So we look forward to the outcome of today's proceedings, and we hope to get an outcome that will be in defense of the 11,000 citizens who are now placed on the breadline, who now cannot know how they are going to get an income to provide food for their families, to purchase books for their children to go to school as we enter a new school term, and all of these daily issues. And of course, I don't want to talk about the unions who conveniently are quite silent on this very critical bread and butter issue. Safe to say we have one union leader describing the workers of CPEP as collateral damage. Another issue I would like to draw to your attention, and I plan not to comment on it at this point in time, but to allow the process to unfold before I come back to you, members of the media and the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, is what is taking place at the Water and Sewage Authority. Ladies and gentlemen, you would recall that when I served as Minister of Public Utilities, the previous government, in a very transparent process, reported to you, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, on every step that was made with respect to the transformation of WASA, down to the recruitment of executive leaders within the organization. All positions advertised locally, regionally, and internationally, to the extent that we got someone who was qualified, a Kittian, who worked extensively in the water sector in Barbados, and he was eventually recruited to the top CEO's position. And I can tell you, as Minister of Public Utilities, I took no role, I took no responsibility, because I believe that WASA needed to go in a direction where it was depoliticized, and you get executive managers who are qualified based on their experience, based on their academic qualification, to take responsibility for a very important utility company, manage it in the way that it's supposed to be managed, outside of the influence of politics and politicians, so that we can have a utility company that can produce the outcome that is required. After a lengthy transformation process, lengthy, transparent recruitment process that cost you, the taxpayers, hundreds of thousands of dollars to put in place an executive leadership team within the organization, you saw that weeks after the April 28 general elections, the Prime Minister ripped apart the transformation plan. They literally chased all of the executive professionals that were put in place by the previous board out of office. And I can tell you, I have been reliably informed that some of these executive officials were escorted out of WASA's compound by security officers. That is the way, and this is the manner in which professionals who have been recruited, all they did was apply for a job based on their executive qualification and experience, and they have been chased away. by security within WASA, simply because you had and you have a minister and a board who are more interested in putting in place their lackeys in key positions within the authority so that they can carry about their mandate, which of course is not in alignment with the interests of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And I warn you to be very careful what you print, to be very careful what you read, to be careful with the information that have been placed in the public domain from these people, because they campaign on lies and they intend to govern this country with lies. A new CEO or acting CEO, who was a low-level manager, non-performer within WASA, was elevated to the position of CEO within the organization. Absolutely no executive experience, no experience whatsoever, no recruitment process that was put in place to have in place within that organization. Persons filling senior executive positions in that authority without any recruitment criteria. And we, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, sit quietly and allow that to happen. I ask myself over and over, had the PNM been doing that, what would have been the response of the media? What would have been the response of so-called opinion makers in this country, where people are literally being taken off the streets and put in executive positions within the authority, and no one is asking any question? As a matter of fact, some of them left the authority 10 or 15 years ago under dubious circumstances with serious allegations of misconduct against them. They are now being brought back into the Water and Sewerage Authority. And if you don't believe what I am saying, you do your work and ask certain questions about some of them that are now being brought back into the Water and Sewerage Authority. Many of them were removed from WASA, even under the previous UNC government between 2010 and 2015, because of alleged misconduct on their part. And they are now within the executive leadership of the Water and Sewerage Authority. The acting CEO just weekend issued a statement dated July the 6th, Northeast Trinidad residents to benefit from enhanced water supply. And that statement was carried in the newspapers that Mr. Javan Joseph, along with the WASA Evolution team, conducted an inspection tour of key facilities on Saturday, July the 5th, 2025. I'm reading an excerpt from that release. To assess infrastructure needs and engage with local stakeholders. And then he talked about at various stages of the tour, the team was joined by councillors within the Arima Borough Council who welcomed the planned improvements to bolster water supply in underserved communities. And then they list out a number of projects that they are going to undertake to improve the supply of water in East Trinidad. They talk about the Guanapo water treatment plant, the plan to increase water production from 3.5 million gallons of water per day to 5.5 million gallons of water, the North Orupuch water treatment plant to install, to increase water production and to replace aging infrastructure, Matura water treatment plant, Sangre Grande well number 4 to develop a well that will produce 500,000 gallons of water. Ladies and gentlemen, this was in February 2025. The same projects that the acting CEO of WASA is saying that they are going to undertake didn't have the decency to tell the people of Trinidad and Tobago that these projects are well on the way, already launched. The projects are well under the way, funded by the IDB program, and was launched in February 2025 when yours truly was Minister of Public Utilities and Penny Beckles was the Minister of Planning and Development. All of these projects which this news release claim or purport to be something new that they are initiating to improve the supply of water to East Trinidad, didn't have the decency to inform you, members of the media, that all of these projects are projects that have been started and are expected to be completed before the end of the year. And I am saying that because it shows that they campaign on lies and they intend to govern with lies. And I want to warn you, members of the media, and to encourage you that before you print, fact check, because these people have no plans whatsoever to govern this country. And they are not even prepared to tell you that some of these projects that they are talking about, even the energy sector and so many other sectors, that they are projects that have been started by the previous People's National Movement government. And of course, because of their benefits to the people of this country, they are continuing with it. I didn't plan to raise this other issue with you because I thought I would deal with it at a different level. But during not the Standing Finance Committee, but the midterm review, the Minister of Public Utilities rose in Parliament, and I'm going to quote a very, what I would say, a very reckless statement that he made in his contribution. And I quote, referring to the WASA transformation plan, "Mr. Speaker, we had another situation arise in WASA. When the government decided that we were rescinding the WASA transformation plan, I asked," and I quote, "could you give me a little bit more detail in terms of how they went about this?" End quote. There was a setting up of a WASA transformation office. And I then asked, where is this office? Is it at WASA? Nobody could tell me where this office is. Later, I found out that they leased a building on Scott Bush Street for $3 million for 5 people to operate out of. This is the Minister of Public Utilities during the debate of the midterm review. That entire water transformation office, Mr. Speaker, when you look at it, it was a slush fund. It was a slush fund, Mr. Speaker. They rented it for $3 million. So I inquired subsequently what this is all about. And I asked for documentation where I thought I needed to get the documentation to verify what the minister has told the country, whether it is true or whether it is false. I got a lease of the building on Scott Bush Street, and the lease was for a period of 24 months, and the lease was for $14,000 per month. A total calculation of about $300 and something thousand per month for the 2 years. The same building that the Minister of Public Utilities stood in the Parliament and lied to the Parliament and the people of Trinidad and Tobago that WASA rented a building for $3 million. $14,000 per month. The minister said it was rented for $3 million. What did I do? In accordance with the appropriate standing orders of the Parliament, I wrote and I invoked the appropriate standing orders of Parliament so that the minister should be held accountable for his blatant lies to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. I wrote and I submitted it to the appropriate authority within the Parliament. And all I can say for now is that the minister was not held to account. The minister was not held to account, even though I produced the documentary evidence to show where he misled and lied to the parliament. Why am I saying that? I am saying that because I am reminding the people of Trinidad and Tobago this morning that the UNC campaigned on lies and they intend to govern with lies. And finally, on the issue of a statement or a report I read this morning, I think in today's Guardian, where they put out another monstrous lie to the people of this country, where they claim that all of these executives that they are now putting in place is going to save this country $34 million. Again, a monstrous and diabolical lie. Because just weeks ago, we had a news conference in Balize House where I showed the new structure or the proposed structure of the Water and Sewage Authority that was being pursued by the previous PNM government. And I explained that at the end of the transformation of the executive leadership of WASA, the country and the authority would realize a saving of $43 million. The current government is now reverting to an old structure that was never approved by cabinet, that was never approved by the CPO's office, with salaries that were never approved, with positions comprising over 426 managers, exactly what they are reverting to. And according to them, when they revert to that old position, there will be a magical saving of $34 million. How can a proposed structure that seeks to reduce your management level by 200 positions could result in a savings of $34 million? It does not make sense. So what it shows is that the new leadership of the Water and Sewage Authority, just like their principals at the level of the government, they intend to continue to operate with lies. And all I can ask you, members of the media, before you print what they put out, please fact check, because the evidence is there and they can be easily fact checked. Just like this piece of document, which was printed in all newspapers in February 2025. February 2025. And on these very same projects, we had a release on the weekend by WASA pretending as though that these are new projects that are being initiated by this government and by this leadership. They never had a plan to govern. And what they are prepared to do is to continue to piggyback on PNM's plans and policies to pretend as though that they are theirs. And hoping that you, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, do not have sound and clear memory, and that you will believe their misinformation. So I will stop at this point, and I will invite Senator Dr. Amery Browne to speak to you on matters relating to CARICOM and other related issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, MP Marvin Gonzalez, Chief Whip. I join with you, with other members of the People's National Movement, in expressing condolences to the Honorable Penelope Beckles Robinson on the sudden demise and unfortunate demise of her younger brother earlier this week. Good morning, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues who are gathered here today for this media conference. As the national community and the regional community are well aware, this week saw the convening in Jamaica of the 49th edition of the CARICOM Conference of Heads of Government in Montego Bay, hosted by the Right Honorable Andrew Holness, Prime Minister of Jamaica. We are also well aware and fully disappointed that the Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, Mrs. Kamla Persad-Bissessar, did not attend this heads of government meeting. I must tell you that this came as a surprise to other heads of government across the region, and we have been besieged by queries, questions, and matters of speculation from across the region as to the reason and rationale for the absence of the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, noting a number of issues. First of all, this is about 2 months since a new government was elected in this country, and this meeting, this in-person meeting, would have been a very important opportunity to reacquaint with peers, other heads of government across the region, to meet heads of government who were elected since 2015. So some would have never had a physical interaction with Kamla Persad-Bissessar before. And also critically, to be able to have direct in-person interaction with some of the special guests that traditionally gather for heads of government meeting. And in this case, I want to reference 2 guests that were present. One was the Secretary General of the Organization of American States, newly elected in 2025, the Honorable Albert Ramden, having assumed that important position with lead hemispheric responsibilities. This was a precious opportunity for Trinidad and Tobago at the head of government level to establish ourselves in the priority of the OAS Secretary General, and also critically, the other important guest that I would reference is the Secretary General of Interpol. The Secretary General of Interpol was present in Montego Bay as a guest at the heads of government meeting, again, having direct bilateral meetings with a number of heads, Trinidad and Tobago being absent at the head of government level. I reference this specifically because Trinidad and Tobago has lead responsibility for regional security within the CARICOM quasi-cabinet. So the absence of our Prime Minister, a full 2 months after being elected, sends all the wrong signals to CARICOM, sends all the wrong signals to the OAS, sends all the wrong signals to Interpol, and certainly particularly to fellow heads of government in this region. It really sends a very unfortunate message. You would recall, members of the national community would recall that Trinidad and Tobago is a founding member of CARICOM, the Treaty of Chaguaramas having been signed right here on our soil on the 4th of July, 1973 in Chaguaramas. Trinidad and Tobago has maintained a leadership role, a policy shaping role since then across administrations. I would say the last low point would have been in the 2010 to 2015 era, when a number of transgressions were committed by the then Prime Minister, Kamla Persad-Bissessar, and her, PP government at the time. And the media would be familiar with some of those transgressions. Disappointing responses to regional natural disasters in some instances, a very disappointing position which they maintain with respect to the Caribbean Court of Justice, which is not supported, that position not being supported by many of her peers, and references to Trinidad and Tobago is not an ATM machine and other very callous statements. The point being that attendance here on July 6th to 8th would have given an opportunity for a responsible Prime Minister to reset the temperature, to reset the engagement, and to reset our leadership and her leadership potentially within the CARICOM family. That opportunity was squandered. And instead of attending, which was in fact her duty so to do, the Prime Minister dispatched two brand new novice ministers to represent this nation in Montego Bay. So yes, there were the obligatory photo ops and kind comments from other members of the regional family. But when it comes to advancing the business of Trinidad and Tobago and the leadership of Trinidad and Tobago, the regional family was left disappointed. And this opportunity was squandered. I want to reference our position with respect to the Caribbean Court of Justice, and that's something that this opposition will be revisiting vigorously with the government of Trinidad and Tobago. But there was another development that took place in Montego Bay that bears some further examination and scrutiny by the media, because there was the announcement of a first wave, a first batch of countries that would be leading CARICOM's implementation of the free movement regime, the free movement regime within CARICOM. This is something that we have discussed, debated, and consulted on for a number of years, with great anxiety from the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Motley, who has lead responsibility for the CSME, the CARICOM Single Market and the Economy. Trinidad and Tobago on this matter as well, particularly during the last 5 years, has carved out a leadership role in that regard, to the extent that the CSME unit here in Port of Spain has been regarded as a model for such implementation right across the region. To the extent that at the beginning of March of this year, the CARICOM Secretariat came to Trinidad and Tobago to engage in consultations on both islands, Trinidad, and with the THA and other stakeholders, and emerge with a very positive disposition on our readiness to implement and lead on the free movement regime. What are we left with today? The 4 countries that are moving forward are Barbados, Belize, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Dominica. And my question to the United National Congress and the Prime Minister of today is, where is Trinidad and Tobago on this very critical issue of regional integration? Why have we not taken a leadership role on this matter? Why are we being left behind? And what is the implementation agenda for this country? So those 4 will be moving forward on October 1st, 2025. Trinidad and Tobago clearly is not a part of that. The question is, when will we become a part of the free movement regime? What is the position of the government of today on this critical matter? You would know that this has been the subject of extensive consultation right across our society. And a number of key groups, the Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Association, the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce, our energy chamber, our services industries sector, and many of the key blocks that employ real people across this country have endorsed and are very enthusiastic about Trinidad and Tobago's leadership and participation in the free movement regime. Is this government going to squander all of that goodwill, all of that hard work, and all of the potential for Trinidad and Tobago, or private sector, and or manufacturers or exporters, and our people who need meaningful employment, to be denied the opportunities that would be derived from the free movement regime? So there are important questions that the government must answer on this matter. It is my view that had the Prime Minister attended in Montego Bay, she would have been forced to answer a number of those questions before the regional media and in front of her peers as well. I put it to you, members of the media here in Trinidad and Tobago, you have an opportunity to press on these matters as opposed to allowing them to be brushed aside. Why did the Prime Minister not attend? Seems a simple question. We have not gotten a straightforward response. We heard Minister Sobers in Montego Bay indicating to, I believe it was CNC3, that there were matters of national importance back at home that required her attention and presence. The obvious follow-up question would be, what were those matters? Have they been disclosed then or since? I can say without fear of contradiction, they have not. I listened keenly to the forum on Monday night to see if there would be some grand disclosure. There was none. And then I heard the dean of the CARICOM heads of government, the informal dean, Ralph Gonzalez, giving a very kind and generous version of an alibi for the Prime Minister, saying that maybe she was tired after having hosted the heavy hosting of Prime Minister Modi. Well, that's his kind version, but I put it to you that the Prime Minister owes an explanation to this country and also to our regional family. So those are some matters that we would want to treat with. While we're on the topic of our regional and foreign policy, there are a number of issues that were really of priority for the People's National Movement government that appear to have fallen on the back burner at this time. And again, I want to admonish members of the media to raise the temperature on the government and ask some of the pertinent questions. One of them is our policy on the Middle East, on the Palestinian and Gaza situation, which, while in opposition, the UNC had some very forceful positions, but they've gone completely silent now that they're in government, may be mindful of other audiences that might be paying attention to their pronouncements. Being in government does not allow you, shade, to hide from key positions and responsibilities. This opposition will be bringing those questions to the fore. Again, the government needs to be very clear on its position on Gaza and the Palestinian issue. The unilateral blockade of Cuba, Trinidad and Tobago has maintained, along with CARICOM colleagues, a robust and consistent position in direct opposition to the United States blockade of the Cuban economy and the Cuban people. On this matter as well, this government has fallen completely silent. That will not be allowed to stand as well. There are many other issues. I know in Montego Bay, the issue of taxes and tariffs was extensively examined. On this matter also, our government has been far too silent. You would note there are threats now to attach additional tariffs to countries associated with the BRICS agenda. And having now further established our connections to the Republic of India, there are some concerns and questions within our economy and among our stakeholders as to potential implications for Trinidad and Tobago. Again, silence is not the responsible option from the government on such matters. So I wanted to raise these issues to put on the record quite squarely the opposition's disappointment and the national community's disappointment with the absence of the Prime Minister from the 49th Heads of Government Conference, to describe it as a squandered opportunity and indeed a dereliction of duty on the part of the Prime Minister and an abdication of our responsibilities under the CARICOM quasi-cabinet, particularly on issues of national and regional security, for which Trinidad and Tobago has lead responsibility within CARICOM. I can't imagine, with the knowledge that the Interpol Secretary General would be present and having meetings with heads, that Trinidad and Tobago would not be present at the heads of government level, unless, of course, there is some matter causing the Prime Minister to have failed to have traveled, which has not been disclosed to the national community. We demand such answers at this time. Just before I hand over the microphone, I want to express, as leader of the opposition bench in the Senate and a member of this strong and united PNM team, our disgust and disenchantment, disillusionment with the government's ongoing, relentless attacks on the independent senators in Trinidad and Tobago. This is clearly not a one-off issue, but a strategy on the part of the government to attack those important senators who serve a critical role under our Constitution. And having shouted and campaigned on issues of democracy and fighting against so-called dictatorship, to have started your term of office, Mrs. Kamala Persad-Bissessar, with this clear strategy of a consistent attack on the independent senators is in itself a clear sign of a trend toward dictatorship. The position appears to be clear. If the independent senators, and I'm using that term deliberately because the UNC has used that term for years, including during the course of June and July of this year in their releases and public utterances, so let's not make it a questionable term. No, they've been using it. Or independent senators, it's clearly a strategy which conveys a message. If they support the government in any measure, in committee stage, or with respect to a bill or motion, they're independent and their word can be trusted. And if they question the government or vote against the government at any level, committee stage or in a bill or motion, that means that they are not independent. That cannot be an intelligent position. That cannot be a democratic position, and that cannot be a position that should be tolerated by any right-thinking citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. The opposition will not sit silently while such conduct is being led and managed by the Prime Minister, the Public Relations Officer of the UNC, sitting MPs on the UNC bench, in the lower house and in the Senate, and other activists and advocates of their version of governance. This opposition will be taking the fight to the government on this issue as well, not on behalf of any individual senators, but on behalf of our Constitution and on behalf of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, who demand better and expect better and deserve better of their government. Thank you very much. I now turn over and will be available for questions. I now introduce my hard-working and highly esteemed colleague, Senator the Honorable Faris Al-Rawi, who is the Public Relations Officer of our great movement and also a very important voice for the PNM and the ordinary citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for attending, viewing, listening to this press conference Of course, I join my colleagues in expressing deepest condolences to our leader of the opposition, our political leader, Penny Beckles, on the loss of her brother. Folks, I've come to talk to you about four things. I've come to talk to you about the issue of marijuana. I've come to talk to you about the issue of the chancellor, about the issue of demerit points, and then general business. The first three, that is the proposed amendments to the age of use and enforcement for marijuana and for alcohol, if you want to conflate those two. The second, which is the issue of demerit points, and third, the issue of chancellor, those all affect the administration of justice. Now, as you are well aware, when I held the position as Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, I quite interestingly dealt with the decriminalization of marijuana. I also introduced the demerit point system, and I did significant amendments to the judiciary and its structure. And those three things were done not only for the social issues, which are very important and I'll touch upon, but largely because of the administration of justice. It was data-driven, if you recall. We went into public consultations and we had a significant point. And basically, if you remember, the government's position, our position as an opposition still is that you have to have plant and machinery, people, process, and law. I want to remind you in relation to that we have said repeatedly that we support good law. What we call for today is disclosure of data and for active consideration, because I noted today the very warm endorsement of the Express newspaper to the government's announcements. It was particularly warm. I welcome that enthusiasm that they have. But I have to say that I really think a lot more needs to be had, and I hope to add a few elements for discussion here to cause us to think. We will support whatever law is proposed that we believe after interrogation takes us in the right direction, but there's some very careful considerations that we have to have sight of. Let me remind you, ladies and gentlemen, access to justice was and still is a very large point. I came holding the position as Attorney General to say that we had 146,000 cases in the magistrates' court every year, dealt with by 43 magistrates. Back then, the magistracy was not digitized. Somebody used to stand by the door and call your name out. God help you if you hear the name. There was no digitization. You didn't have records. There were no filing systems, nothing. Fast forward, we introduced the criminal division. We introduced the civil division. We introduced the children and family division. We took the number of judges from 36 to 64. We took the Court of Appeal from 12 to 15. And very importantly, we introduced the legislative anchor for an office called the Court Executive Administrator. And there were deputy court executive administrators put in the criminal division, the family and children division, etc. But when we looked at the caseload of 146,000 cases, 104,000 of those cases were motor vehicle and road traffic cases. When we looked at the data coming from the marijuana discussion, I want to remind you that in that marijuana discussion, we were talking about, listen to this number, 53,085 cases having been filed in the period 2010 to 2018. Let me remind you, 53,000 cases in 8 years. On average, 7,000 plus marijuana cases. And when we took the decriminalization and demerit points side by side, it was specifically to reduce the workload of the magistracy, but importantly, to divert people who ran into difficulties with the law on the roads and with marijuana into a different place of treatment. On the roads, we were treating with fixed penalties, we are treating with notices to contest, and we introduced the merit points specifically to change the way in which people behaved on the roads. You will recall, and you are active witnesses to the fact that people drive and generally tend to obey the speed limit. Most people are afraid to cross 100 because they know that there'll be an offense. You remember the outcry, how the government had slowed down the road when everybody was driving at 80 kilometers because the speed limit was 80. We had to raise the speed limit to 100. Now, the data demonstrated that that shift and use of demerit points to weigh you down, to self-regulate you, caused a 65-year low in road traffic deaths. Let me repeat that, a 65-year low in road traffic deaths. But the data on marijuana is extremely important. The data on marijuana shows in the period which was then before me, the 8-year period, 2010 to 2018. Remember, we dealt with this law in 2019. We showed that 97% male conviction, male remanding, and the vast majority of people affected by possession of marijuana was in our African youth. Let me repeat that. There is a disproportionate presentation of data which shows that young African males are caught into this system of African origin, or African Trinidadian and Tobagonian brothers and sisters. In my own past constituency, San Fernando West, I could testify to the areas where that was very predominant. Now, there is an extreme advantage to be applauded in refocusing this conversation on protecting youth. We certainly stand in support of that. The question here today is, what is the data behind this decision, and how are we going to treat with it? You see, you must remember that we locked in the age limit for a child at 18. In our Family and Children Division, we created the Drug Treatment Court. But if you're under 18 years old, you don't have, if you're over 18 years old, forgive me, you don't have the drug treatment referral, which is in the Children Division. Therefore, the merit to be looked for is in taking offenders. If you look at the data again presented up to 2019, you will see that under 25, there's a high proportion of charges on the record. High proportion. You can't get a job if you have a conviction. You don't have a certificate of character. I want to add to this what's going on in our country. When the Prime Minister did not attend the CARICOM Summit of Heads, and there was the explanation that it was for important national issues, I genuinely expected that the Prime Minister, who has said to us that she loves the nation, would have been attending at the Monday night forum, which just happened, and would have said to us what was going to be done with the 20,000 people who have been fired in 7 weeks. You catch the dots being connected? 20,000 people under distress, CPEP and forestry workers. Go and have a look at the bucket that is comprised of our good brothers and sisters there. What are the demographics? What do they look like? The socio-economic and other demographics. What do they look like? You will find that an implementation of the marijuana law is going to have a serious consequence that we need to factor in how we prescribe law to save ourselves. I want to raise something that I wrestled with whether I should raise or not, but I think that I am suitably qualified to raise this. There seems to be no apparent regard by this government for equity and for balance. I'm going to read from the Business Express. This is the Daily Express business. Listen to this. Former GORTT CEO appointed Heritage Chairman. The Express understands that the new board also includes, I'm going to read surnames alone, Hassan Ali, Dukaran, Suku, Hansraj, Ramraj, and Ramlal. Does that sound reflective of Trinidad and Tobago? I'm asking a serious question. I could ask that question because I come from similar background and orientation. I'm worried, folks, genuinely, about where we're headed to. If you get to the demerit points, how are we going to better supervise behavior on the roads in a less intrusive way? Are we going to go back to 104,000 cases in court? Are we going to increase the numbers of challenge proceedings in terms of, notices to contest? What does the removal of advancing support for policy that makes sense? But the policy must have data. And I am warning that there is a disproportionate effect on this law that is going to be felt by a base that is very different from another base. Isn't it going to be the same thing in Stand Your Ground? Who in Mbakade, who in the Marabella train line, who in the Harp, who in La Hoqueta has ground to stand? Where is your ground in an HTC community? Where's your ground in a squatting community? There are hundreds of thousands of squatters. Who is going to have the access to guns? There is an underlying conversation right now in Trinidad and Tobago that must be had. Does the current government have in its mind, by way of its choices, a genuine reflective cognizance for all of Trinidad and Tobago? That is my question. And we must treat with it. In relation to the court executive administrator and the chancellor, I want to remind that the present government, when in opposition, went to war with the office of the court executive administrator. They did not support, in the course of the debate, the creation of the executive office and the deputies. There has been a broadside attack against one former court executive administrator. There have been 4 since her, and I'm speaking specifically about retired Master Christian Morris Allen. I want to state publicly here that notwithstanding and contrary to the very wrong statements in the parliament that Master Morris Allen was working for the AG's office as a consultant and the judiciary and was still in the judiciary. That's just not true. She retired ages ago and was acting as a consultant. So I just want to put that to bed. But the chancellor is a concept which has long been moved away from in other jurisdictions. I want to remind you that the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago sets up the judiciary, read from sections 99 onward. I want to remind you that there is administrative management in the judiciary. That's why I mentioned plant and machinery, people, process, and law. I want to remind you that there's been a massive digitization of the judiciary. I take credit in part for that in working with the judiciary and in working with the government and as AG pushing forward those reforms. I mean, it's not lost upon everyone that you now go to court virtually. And I want to caution against the brandishing statements that the Prime Minister made. The Law Association has found its voice, the Honorable Prime Minister complained, and they should have been talking about virtual courts. Virtual courts have allowed for better access to justice, particularly for people that can't attend. And virtual courts now see a completely reorganized magistracy where you have a digitized environment, you have electronic appearances, you have an entirely different structure. But when you get to the issue of the chancellor is not a term just to be bandied around like that. It must be plugged into where the judiciary stands right now, and therefore we must have caution on the introduction of any concept of chancellor. We need more information. We need more interrogation of the structure because, as Senator Browne correctly identified, there has been an unholy broadside attack against the independent bench. Go back to the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Section 40 sets up the composition of the Senate. 9 persons in the Senate are to be appointed by the president in his or her own discretion. Since time has set up our parliament, we've been doing that. Senator Browne put it beautifully. According to the UNC, if you support the UNC as a government, you are independent. But if you make the mistake question law, you are not independent. There has been an incredible attack against Senator Vera, somebody who I served with in the period 2010 to 2015. I presented as Attorney General before him in 2015 to 2022, and as Minister of Rural Development and Local Government. Senator Vera has had serious issues with laws, sometimes that I piloted myself. Never once did you hear me complain about Senator Vera's disposition or arguments in law. Instead, we listened to it. I have passed hundreds of laws, and it never once bothered me that the independent bench had an issue with a law that was being presented. Never. And I cannot for the life of me say that we are headed in the right democratic direction when you listen to a government consistently attack independent offices. Unless you're with them, something wrong with you. And on the issue of CPEP, when you look at it in the category of other issues right now, I expected the Prime Minister at the Monday Night Forum to be talking about financial support. We call upon the government to give financial support to dismissed workers. We are in the middle of the school vacation. Book lists have to be bought. We have uniforms to be handled. 20,000 people nearly have lost their jobs. Not a word was spared for these workers by the government at the Monday Night Forum. Not a single word. I genuinely thought that those were the important national issues that Mrs. Prasad Bisesa wanted in self-described mother of the nation to talk to people directly about. I would have said, well, okay, CARICOM comes second because we've never historically had 20,000 people fired in 7 weeks. That is a large national event. And I find it remarkable, folks, that the coverage of the media is as it is. Apparently, there are no more floods in Trinidad and Tobago. There's a disappearance of the death clock on the front page of the Express that we used to have all the time and other newspapers. It just disappeared. What's going on, folks? I'm concerned about where our democracy is headed to. I don't stand here today to say that we oppose adjustments in age limits for drinking and for marijuana or in other aspects, but there must be more than a simple statement. And there must be financial support for CPEP workers and forestry workers. We understand that nearly 5,000 URP workers are next. Let me repeat that. We understand that nearly 5,000 URP workers are next. If you're going to be doing all of that, and you're going to be driving the statistical resurgence of crime and criminality, etc., where are we going? Where are CPEP workers going to be employed? In a marijuana field? In a bar? Are they going to be driven? Where is the psychological management of the trauma that our brothers and sisters are feeling, folks? And listen to me, I want to warn the UNC and people like David Naked and others. You could reflect upon my personal circumstances as much as you want. It will never change my advocacy as it has always been for people in this country. For people in this country. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to ask, ladies and gentlemen of the media, what has happened to the Housing Village Improvement Program? Why have all houses stopped? Who was the HVIP program for? The poorest of the poor. $150,000 to $250,000 for a home for a squatter. Go to the Marabella train line, go to Maruga, go to any place in Trinidad and Tobago you've seen an HVIP home and tell me it's not a laudable objective. Why have all matters stopped? It's okay, there's policy changes to happen. We accept changeovers, but it cannot just be that just because you are perceived to be PNM, that you are fired. It cannot be that that is the case. I held very high political office in this country and never engaged in that behavior. Never. Talk to Brian Baig, Senator Baig, you know him? Ask him if he didn't work out his entire contract in the AG's office when I was there. Happily. He used to be there sitting down in the public gallery of the parliament when he was supposed to be at work, and I'd have to tell him, you know, Brian, you have a job, you know. You're supposed to turn up to work, you know, please go back to work. Loudest choir boy on the bench, Brian Baig. Not as loud as Panarat, but loud. And I'm being dead serious, folks. There has to be a statement of support for the CPEP workers. We're in the middle of litigation. There are multiple forms of litigation. I noticed they had a lot of derogatory things to say about Senior Counsel Larry Lala. He never won a case. Same man quoted in the newspapers as winning a landmark defamation case for Dr. Munilal. He was the lawyer that won that case in the Court of Appeal. But he's apparently the only silky that he's deserving of is Parata, according to Saddam Hussein. Folks in the media, I respect the fact that you've offered a honeymoon period. Let's get back to business now. Amery, I'm sure you'll agree that the Black Sean Douglas. Yes, Kim. You too. Richard Lord. Where's the death clock? Murders. Interrogation. I mean, we don't have unseasoned people. The Minister of Homeland Security is a very seasoned person. Comes from the police, not so. Ran a whole show on television, not so. Directly involved, not so. How come? And it cannot just be that people live in fear right now of just being politically labeled. There is a rampant fear in this country. And this was the tyranny I was referring to since April 28th, on the night of the elections, when I warned that we were going to head exactly down this path. I was criticized for saying that this would happen. So in summary, we call for the data on the adjustments to the marijuana utilization by age, for alcohol as well. We ask what the legal consequence is going to be. Where are you diverting people who are in offense to the law? Are they going to go into drug treatment? Are they going to go into peer resolution? They're not children, so there's a problem inside of there. What do the racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic dynamics demonstrate in that data pool? What are they? Who are going to be affected? How are we going to enforce the law? Are we going to be driving children into an underground, or young adults into an underground economy, which will exacerbate crime and security? I mean, folks, you all know what happened in the Prohibition. You saw what happened right here in Trinidad and Tobago, which is why we decriminalized marijuana. I want to remind that the Cannabis Authority is yet to be fully operationalized. That has a significant effect upon the marijuana discussion. The Cannabis Authority, where you can have proper legal dispensaries, you can go into the economy of the structure. There is another leg. On the aspect of youth, please permit me to say that we left a very good law in the Legislative Review Committee, and that is the National Youth Development Agency, where we deal with how we treat with young people, both on a voluntary standard and on an involuntary standard, where the courts refer you for national service or other positions. There's an excellent law that was intended to treat with that cohort of people that find themselves in difficulty. There is a law inside of the LRC for that. Please pull it out, have a look at it. I'm asking the Honorable Attorney General. On the issue of the Chancellor, in summary, we're saying a lot more discussion has to happen. Please look at the processes of the court having divisions of court. Look at the executive court management system and the deputy system. On the issue of the demerit points, we caution that there will be an upswing in the number of motor vehicle and road traffic cases, which would then drown the judiciary again. Remember, 104,000 motor vehicle and road traffic cases were the numbers prior to the demerit points being introduced and fixed penalty systems. And very importantly, in the issue of the independent senators, Section 40 of the Constitution is entrenched by Section 54. To interfere with the independent senators, if you wanted to in a formalistic way in law, you would need a 3/4 majority of the parliament in the House and a 2/3 majority in the Senate. Go and check Section 54. You have to understand it is not right to be attacking individuals in the independent bench and attacking the president in that manner. And that's to be balanced with, of course, the right to freedom of political expression. But there must be an engagement on a rules-based system. And of course, on the CPEP issue, we call for immediate provision of support. The vast majority of persons inside of there, nearly 40%, are single mothers earning minimum wage. And I ask the foolish conversation to talk about where you come from and who you are, and you can't talk because of this and that. The Prime Minister lives in a palace, ladies and gentlemen, with a helipad next door by the neighbor's yard, as it used to be in the old days. Are the children of the Prime Minister, therefore, entitled to public service? Which one of the UNC members are not driving multi-million-dollar cars? The vast majority of them are. You see the return of massive blue lights on the road. Have you seen some of the ministers with 3 and 4 follow cars? I have seen an eruption of black Prados with blue lights. So let's return to some fair analysis. The opposition wishes to support law, which is good, but we need to have data interrogation. I think that we all three now offer ourselves to your questions, should there be any. I'll just stay here until you call someone else to take my spot.
Chancellor situation. The Chancellor situation. When I heard about it, what struck me is the separation of powers. is if the Chief Justice, so the proposal from government was that he will do his judicial functions, but administrative functions, you will have somebody for the chancellor taking over. Do we know if this chancellor is going to be seen as incursion on the independence of judiciary, or is it going to be somebody who is within the judiciary, or an independent constitution holder, or a part of the executive? Is there any thoughts or any indications?
Well, this is exactly why we're calling for information, because we can't tell you what it is. We don't know. Chancellors exist in the UK in two different forms. They exist in other jurisdictions in different ways, but there is existing law right now where functions can be managed via the executive court administrators and the divisions that we have created. Remember, before our government took hold in 2015, there was just a Supreme Court, the Court of Appeal, the High Court, and then you had the magistracy. There were no divisions of court created and no administrative structures of the kind that we legislated, and which, interestingly, then opposition, now government, resisted. They refused to do it. So we're calling for that, to have a better understanding of whether there's an issue of separation of powers and how it is to be treated. I respectfully believe that anything that would advance the better administration of justice is worthy of support, but we are calling for the details on it. Microphone for, yeah, please.
Okay, let's get back to CPAP, right? There have been members of the government putting out stuff on social media claims that contracts of executive amounts have been issued to relatives and friends of PNM members. And I saw some persons, for example, of Dr. Gully, would have rubbished that idea, but I wanted to get your views on that, because they say, I guess they're referring to persons that they were calling goose workers, etc. And they say that they are related to the PNM persons, etc.
I just think that we are into the continuation of bacchanal, particularly by the little butcher. Bacchanal. And what that represents is bring forward and bring your evidence. And you must remember this, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody in this country is entitled to bid, work, and live, you know. It can't just be the PNM going out of power. So everybody who was associated and supported with the PNM, well, you can't get a government job, you have to be fired, you can't get a CPEP job, you can't get a contract which you bid for. That is not the way a democracy works. And they have to do a lot better than say, aha, I wonder if this one know that one. And Penny's father died 10 years ago. They're calling the poor man from his demise and departure from this earth to account for something from 10 years ago. Let me remind you, under the UNC, CPEP used to cost almost $700 million a year. It is now down to $355 million a year. And contractors are contractors. It's a fixed price and fixed term contract. You can't just extrapolate the numbers, but are these people to believe? You listened to my colleague, the chief whip, a little while ago, say that Minister Padarat had said, slush fund for the boys and girls, $3 million for a building. It turned out to be $14,000 a month. You just can't believe these people. And that's why I endorse Mr. Gonzalez's call for fact-checking. You will realize it's just a cut and paste. I mean, it's easy to push a lie. The truth is often hard to catch up to a lie. So we don't accept what they say, and we say that there is a process by which you can treat with these things, but you have to look at the rights of the workers. You can't have three very full-mouthed ex-union leaders very respectfully chewing their food with their mouths closed, not reflecting upon nearly 20,000 people who have lost their jobs. I expected on the Monday night forum to have word about a book grant, a stipend, a rent relief, a food card, temporary food card till you find the thing, the process by which you reapply for the jobs. None of that. WASA was a big issue. Fire the executive management. Brooks, $100,000 a man now. in executive management in WASA. Really? By what process? Ex-Minister Gonzalez told you that WASA had a process by which people applied for jobs, were interviewed for jobs. There was a panel done. There was a whole discussion. Questions were answered in Parliament. Brap! Under the UNC. But take a walk, man. Take $100,000. Not a question coming from the media. Not a question.
And you mentioned support from government that you haven't heard about. I saw MP Young distributed hampers to CPF members in his constituency. I want to know this appeared and they are other opposition MPs.
It's a humanitarian thing. All of us are helping where we can. People are crying. And you know the response to my statement is going to be, look, Faris talking. How Faris talking? I mean, I'm not in the privileged position of Anil Roberts to mash up a car and drive our next one the next day. All of us have our obligations to meet. And it's not good enough that that is the case. Everybody is helping. But the pocket which is deepest and has the temporary resources, isn't it the government? How many people in the Ministry of People? How many people? Don't we have temporary food cards? Don't we have income support? Don't we care? The government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago has the greatest form of support. We showed you in COVID what that looked like. We did it with Petrotrin. With Petrotrin, you went home with severance and retrenchment. You went home with ex gratia. You went home with land. People went home with millions of dollars in settlement. You went home with an understanding as to how you could reapply for your job. We went home with a participation of the union at the table on the discussions. Where is that? Where is Mr. Batiste? Where is Mr. Collateral Damage Clyde? Where is Mr. Kesar? Where are they? Where is Mr. Roger? Really?
We can see the growing trend of governments, like I saw, for example, government senators not accepting proposed amendments, right? Whether it's from independents, whether it's from opposition senators, right? And similarly in the lower house. The opposition has said that it will support good policies, good bills. Is it that we want to know what's your view overall on this new age limit for the alcohol and things? Let's say that they continue the trend and the amendments, more information that you're asking for, is not granted, it's not received well by the opposition, by government, sorry. Is it that the opposition will still support this?
The devil is in the details. What is the consequence of the law? How are you enforcing the law? Was the consequence to the person who gives it to you? Was the consequence of the person who is using it? How do you regulate an 18-year-old who is no longer a child up to 25 or up to 21? Where are you driving that business? Where is the business going to go to? Speakeasies? To people who are a little bit too young, in the prohibition period, you'd have a speakeasy. You talk quietly and the alcohol comes out. Are we going to create an industry that is hidden? Is that in your best interest? Does it promote crime? What about the parlor that sells alcohol in the way that they do? You see, there is an alternative mechanism to this, which is why I mentioned the youth agency. The Ministry of Youth Development had come up with a law, which I, in part, created as chairman of the LRC. Equally, Marvin Gonzalez as chairman of the LRC. We came up with this law. It's there. You have to manage the consequence of the law. And that's what we're asking for. And more than that, the age limit applied with there being an offense now. It must be a serious offense. The consequence there, who does it target? In the realities of Trinidad and Tobago, I showed you the data, I reminded you the data for marijuana. 97% of the target audience is going to be young Afro-Trinidadian males. What's that going to happen? You're going to lock them up? Lock us up? Okay, there's a lot. It's why, for instance, in developing the demerit points, when I developed the demerit points with Marvin Gonzalez, who was head of legal then in the Ministry of Works and Transport, when we developed it, we said that we can change society by putting a soft self-regulatory approach. You regulate how fast you drive and whether you obey traffic laws, and you know that the consequences, you'll get demerit points. And look at what happened, a 65-year low in road traffic deaths and a drop in the number of cases in the courts. You have to understand what will work in Trinidad and Tobago. But if you're going to add that onto CPEP, what's the demographics of the people hurt in CPEP? Let's be analytical and fourth estate to first estate for a moment. Who really get bonks? Where are your questions on that? What do the demographics look like? You send home 15,000 CPEP and forestry workers. What do we look like in CPEP and position, socioeconomic? What do we look like? What is our income base? What is our position? And it's not good enough, Anil Roberts and Philip Alexander. Go and ask Faris for money. Really? I listening to Philip Alexander again talking about the way I look. Mr. Alexander, go to a gym. It produces wonderful side effects. You could run on the road, you could touch your toes, your belly will go. Don't be watching other man to tell them things. I'm being serious. Because that's the answer that you're being given to the serious questions that are being posed. You catch where I'm coming from? I don't mean to be derogatory and I don't mean to be trite, but sometimes you have to see things that way.
That's on the same topic because we really are going to marijuana, but your thoughts on gambling usually as well.
Again, I mean, we're dealing with a legitimate aim, and I commend the discussion from the government. The legitimate aim here is the tendencies to addiction for gambling, for alcohol, and for drug utilization. The Honorable Prime Minister is correct on the legitimate aim. You want me to repeat that? People are often shocked that I give credit where it's due, that we do. That is a good legitimate aim. Question is, how do we work it out? And what are the skewed effects going to be? And how do you balance the pushback from that? Because there may be a pushback. Underground economy, who's going to end up in the system? Is it going to be clogged? Are there going to be greater number of cases? That is where the discussion has to happen. You catch where I'm going? That is what we're calling for. We have no difficulty with the age of discretion on positions. In fact, our government was called upon in the last couple of years to look, in the last year, to look at the issue of marijuana and the age limit at 25. Our government was, but we had to go back and have a look at the Cannabis Control Authority because that was being operationalized. So on the gaming and gambling, that law, as you know, has started. The Gaming Commission was done. It's being operationalized. You'll remember why it took so long for these laws to pass? Because the opposition, now government, didn't support any of it. You'll remember when they used to make a mockery of my utilization of Surat? We got to strike down the law and Faris can't pass a law and Surat as well. The Privy Council upheld it. Thank the Lord God. It wasn't the UNC. And that's how I managed to pass simple majority law on the basis of proportionality. So the UNC having delayed the hell out of it for 8-9 years. Come to tell you, well, it take long. They may do nothing. Oh, go back and look at the record and see how long you put it in Joint Select Committee, looking for 3/5 majority, for us to retrofit the bill to simple majority, to water it down. But come back to the socio-economic discussion that we need to have as a country now. What is the effect of stand your ground? What is the effect of marijuana age limit and alcohol age limit? Who does it affect from socio-economic and other brackets? And how are we going to treat with the aspect of it? There being a legitimate aim we accept. Kim? My colleagues are also available, please. Yeah.
Morning, Kim Woodrum, Express. Just to stay on the topic of cannabis and CPAP for a quick little bit again. And in the past, when you were piloting those cannabis laws as well, you had spoken about the potential of the industry in cosmetics, in medicine, etc. So I want to ask you, you said that this is the age of discretion is not going to stop people from trying to do it in the dark. So is it a missed opportunity then, rather, for many in the country to have probably made money off of it in a different way, in a much bigger way than simply, selling marijuana on the streets? But recreational personal use? And was that a missed opportunity? And will you still, people said for us, and the potential of that industry to earn big money for the same people who may not be affected by law for having it in their possession and so on. And then very quickly, the CPAP. I mean, the government has said people will get their jobs back where it's legitimate. How long could that possibly take?
Thank you for the two questions. You remember when I first raised the issue of legalization versus decriminalization and treating with cannabis? I recall Dr. Rowley was asked a question by Jules Browne at the airport, and he received a very stern answer about, where Faris get that from. Needless to say, history will prove that I have been a strong advocate for regulating decriminalization and for the creation of the Cannabis Authority. I am not a user of drugs in any form. I don't support its utilization, but I recognize that too many people were in conflict with the law and that there was an economic opportunity, which is why I advanced and the cabinet accepted and the government took the position to advance the laws. We were looking at the INC, the International Narcotics Regulations, to manage how the Cannabis Authority would have settled on its feet. That took a little while. It's now ripe. I call upon the government to operationalize the Cannabis Authority, the Control Authority. It will have a diversion. In fact, in many of the consultations, I reminded people that champagne is sparkling wine grown in Champagne in France, the region called Champagne. So there are geographic indications that have value. And I still think that the cannabis industry is one that has, if it's properly regulated and supervised, it has a great potential, and I call upon the government to complete the work that we started. In relation to CPEP, the government says if you're properly qualified, but you have people like Barry, the little butcher, Padarat, saying that your qualifications can't involve any association with the PNN. Why else is he calling out names? I couldn't tell you who CPEP contractors are or not are, The CPEP company hired those persons, and a lot of them were holdovers from a time long before that. In my 10 years in government, I couldn't tell you that a single conversation arose to say that's a UNC contractor, bossy truth. Never happened. It never happened. Now, you're just being fed this little one-liner diet with glee by Padarat. I mean, you look at the gentleman. He is in glee when he's talking about busing truth for PNM boys and girls. Am I making it up? Or you don't see a little expression of glee in the young man's face? I mean, I think he's a competent human being. If properly directed, can bring good results. I urge him to be that version of himself. That's all I see. Anything for Dr. Browne? Yes, please. Thank you all so much.
Anyone who's going to
What's this?
you spoke about the executives of WhatsApp, being exported out, and you spoke about the new acting CEO not having the experience, the managerial experience, etc. I see here that he was once the manager of technical services of the wastewater.
That's a low-level position in the authority. Very, very low level.
I guess that's one of the
He did absolutely nothing. Yes, before 126. Before 126. Yeah, very low level position. Absolutely no executive experience. Never even reported to a board on anything under his charge. I don't know if he applied, but certainly if he applied, he was deemed not to be suitable because he would have been within that executive structure. I just want to tell you something. When Minister Padarat, I think you would recall, Amery, I think you were at that news conference at Balize House. And I asked a direct question to Minister Padarat. Who is Javon Joseph? You can go back to your record. He walked into WASA with Mr. Javon Joseph. And Mr. Javon Joseph is now the CEO of WASA. You could imagine if I had done something like that. I don't think I would have survived one day in a PNM cabinet had I conducted myself in this way. I would not have survived. Walking into a statutory authority, being accompanied by someone, and exactly, calling for contracts to be terminated, calling for this one, calling for that one. And I asked the question in the news conference at Balizi House, can Minister Padarat tell the country who is Mr. Jivan Joseph? And he never answered the question. And I can tell you more about who is Jivan Joseph, but at the appropriate time. At the appropriate time. Long rope for Magagot. Stand by.
Okay, so what
I'll
happens?
tell you more.
What happens since the holiday now? Because there are a lot of speculation.
And you see, they talk about $34 million being sealed, which of course is a lie. Because how can a management structure in a transformation process be reduced from 426 managers to 225 managers? And we would have shown that at the end of that restructuring of the management of WASA, there's going to be a saving of $43 million. And today in The Guardian, they put forward some figure, not comparing apples with apples and oranges with oranges, to again continue their lies and their fabrication and their misinformation. Because they know fully well what they are doing. To say that, oh, they're going to be a savings, going to be savings of $30-something million or something. Nothing is further from the truth. But I want to also put something here on the table. The millions of dollars that they are going to pay for all of these executives whose contracts they have illegally terminated, they should also take that into consideration. They should also take that into consideration because most of these executives, in my understanding, they had 3-year contracts with the ability to extend to a further 2 years, taking it to approximately 5 years. And their contracts have been terminated within 6 months. Within 6 months. And you know what is their justification for terminating these contracts? Well, the transformation plan was scrapped, and therefore all of these positions are no longer valid. But the transformation plan had a position for CEO. Your current structure, the current structure that they have reverted to, has a position of CEO. So what then is the basis for firing a CEO that has been hired by international best practice to get someone to run a modern utility company? And worse yet, the same salary you paid that you are paying this inexperienced CEO, acting CEO, is the same salary that you paid the CEO that you dismissed. And mind you, that salary was negotiated not with the Ministry of Public Utilities. It was negotiated directly with the CPO. That's the process that you follow. Not even sanctioned by the cabinet. It is negotiated, it is established. All of these positions that you're talking about, we could not have started filling these positions without these positions being sanctioned by the CPO's office. It has to go through the HRAC, the Human Resource Advisory Committee of the cabinet. All of these things, that is a process. And that is the reason why it took that length of time, because you have to go through these individual process. And imagine in 2 months' time, entirely scrapped. And then you recruit people who were once, and listen to me, who were once removed from WASA under questionable circumstances. Can you imagine one of these people were fired by Ganga Singh for corruption? One of these executives removed from WASA because of alleged corrupt activities by one former minister, Ganga Singh, is not within the management of that authority. And if you are fired by Ganga Singh for corruption, then you're no good. Tells you everything. Tells you everything. But Minister Padarat want to talk about job for the boys and girls. How many of them walk behind him in the election campaign? How many of them are current UNC councillors? Ask the question. I asked the question at the news conference in Bali's house, and I called two names. One, Jivan Joseph, and there's another one. Go back to the records and ask whether or not this other name, that person, is a current UNC councillor. And the temerity of Minister Padarat, the butcher, to come and talk about boys, job for the boys and girls, he's nothing but a hypocrite and a pathological liar who would not settle down to do his work. And he will never settle down to do his work. Because, of course, he's busy running the office of the Prime Minister. So, we will continue to do our work as a PNM opposition. We're going to do that responsibly, and we are going to hold them to account. And even if they invoke standing orders in the parliament not to answer questions, and they're allowed to do it, well, then we will go to the public and ask those questions. We're going to utilize our weekly press conferences to ask legitimate questions, and we are going to go to the public and have those questions answered. No muzzling of the opposition in the parliament going to prevent us from doing our work. We have other platforms to do it.
The other thing with the phone would have been Krishna Prasad.
Yes.
Those two individuals, Mr. Prasad and Mr. Joseph, what has been, as former public utility minister, what was your interaction?
I never met those gentlemen. I never met them. I don't know who they are. Yes. I was all over. I wore WASA jacket, and I was all over, you know, turning on wells and refurbishing water treatment plants and give. By the way, I want to ask Barry, that press release that he said that WASA issued, and he wasn't even aware that WASA issued a press release saying that the 24/7 level of coverage is not 61%, but it is really 30-something%. That was never sanctioned by Mr. Halliday. I will say that much. Mr. Halliday never sanctioned the issue of that press release. And I am prepared to say more on it at the appropriate time, because they campaign on lies and they will govern with lies.
What happens to Mr. Halliday? You know, imagine you were just hired on December 1st to come to Trinidad.
And perhaps that's the reason why the Prime Minister did not go to the CARICOM conference. Because Mr. Halliday is well known to Prime Minister Miyamoto. Well known to him, because he worked at the Barbados Water Authority, and he worked there for quite a number of years. And I can tell you this much. Before Mr. Halliday was released to take up this position in Trinidad and Tobago, we had to speak to the Prime Minister of Barbados. We had to speak to the Prime Minister of Barbados. Literally. Because he was performing and he was functioning competently at the authority, and his departure from the Barbados Water Authority would have been a tremendous loss to that authority. And in order to get him to come to Trinidad, certain high-level discussion had to take place between the government of Trinidad and Tobago and the government of Barbados. And to see how Mr. Halliday was treated, and 2 days before his dismissal, the same Barry Padarat said that we recruited an incompetent professional from Barbados. Can you all believe that? A minister of government, Barry, who never turned on a standpipe to give people water, perhaps doesn't know what a pipeline look like, recruited a CARICOM water professional, after a very transparent and a long process to get him to come to Trinidad, a Barbadian citizen, or a Kittian citizen, worked in the water sector in Barbados, established himself. As a matter of fact, when he was appointed, a lot of water professionals around the world asked me as Minister of Public Utilities, what did we do in Trinidad to attract someone like Mr. Halliday? Because he was being courted by many water authorities around the world. Many water authorities, because of his professionalism, well known in the water sector, not in the region, but around the world. And Minister Padarat, standing in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, placed on Hansard that Mr. Halliday is an incompetent water professional. That is the scandalous nature of some of these ministers in this current government. And we must not have it. We have to defend people who come forward to offer themselves and to offer their professionalism to benefit our citizens, and not allow people like Barry Padarat to stand in Parliament under the cover of parliamentary privilege and desecrate people's name in the way that he accustomed doing.
I'm sure this must have been embarrassing to you, seeing that it was while you were. Did you reach out to him? How is he doing? What's the conversation like?
All I had to say to Mr. Halliday was I begged forgiveness, and I told him, and I'm being very honest with you, and as I've always been, I told him that a simple WhatsApp message. I didn't speak to him on the phone. I sent him a WhatsApp message, and I told him that the behavior of this government and the behavior of this minister is not Trinidad and Tobago. And that is not our value system as a country. And he said, yes, he understands that very well, and that he's in contact with his family. I did not ask him that. I did not ask him that, but I thought I needed to reach out to him and apologize to him for the behavior of a sitting government and a sitting minister, because I believe that he would have left Trinidad and Tobago thinking that that kind of behavior is something that we endorse in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. And I thought that as a member of Parliament and a member of the People's National Movement, I needed to distance Trinidad and Tobago from the scandalous behavior of the UNC and Minister Padarat. And I'll tell you this much. When I came into the Ministry of Public Utilities, we had certain regional conferences. And to get these conferences in Trinidad and Tobago, I had to coax and I had to assure professionals in the water sector in this country that this era of management in WASA and in Ministry of Public Utilities is different from the past. Because professionals did not want to come to Trinidad and Tobago. International businesses had no interest in doing business with WASA. Far less to come to Port of Spain to participate in conferences. Because as far as they are concerned, especially during the period 2010 to 2015, it was corruption that reigned, and people's businesses suffered as a result of that. And we were able to do work. We were able to establish conferences in the region to reposition Trinidad and Tobago as a leader in the water sector. And that is the reason why you had someone like Mr. Halliday, as well as other professionals around the world applying for jobs within the water sector in this country. We even had citizens of Trinidad and Tobago who left Trinidad and Tobago to work in other sectors around the world because of lack of interest in working in Trinidad and Tobago in the water sector. And they applied to come back to Trinidad because they were convinced that we have turned the corner and the water sector is a place that they can work in. And to see what is happening again, I can tell you something. It has done irreversible damage to the reputation of Trinidad and Tobago in the water sector. And it is going to take perhaps 10 or 15 years to rebuild the confidence of our stakeholders around the world and the region to want to do business in Trinidad and Tobago and to collaborate with us because of the behavior of Minister Padarat, supported by the Prime Minister and his other colleagues. It has done irreversible damage to what we have tried to recover from over the last 5 years. So I don't plan to say anything more than that. But again, to use this platform to apologize to people of the region, to apologize to all professionals who would have sacrificed so much to apply for a job in the water sector, to give off their best, to apologize to all of them for the scandalous behavior of this current government. I apologize to them for that. And I want to ask them, do not lose hope, because we in the PNM, we are going to return to governance once more in the not too distant future, and we are going to put the water sector back on a trajectory of growth and stability. Anyone who has been recruited under the PNM government, they are at risk, given the behavior of this government and this minister. Every single professional who came forward, and all they did was to apply for a job and went through rigid recruitment process. What we have seen so far is that they have no care, no concern for it. And once you have been recruited under the PNM government, you are marked for political death. Yes.
Quick question would be, in these times, everything is very easily and pretty known and widespread. Do you think that would be a deterrent for any other professionals in the region?
It will be, and that's the point I'm making. That's the point I'm making. Because I can tell you, as a former Minister of Public Utilities, what the work that we had to do to get these people to be interested to come here and to work with us and to our colleagues, because you can't do it alone. You can't do it alone. Businesses, speaking to people within the IDB, they had no interest in doing work in Trinidad and Tobago, because they say to get work in the water sector in Trinidad and Tobago, you have to pay bribes. That is what they were accustomed to. That is what they were accustomed to. And to get a job in WASA, you needed to know someone, you needed to know a minister, or you needed to know someone within the authority. That is what they were accustomed to. But we were able to incrementally rebuild the trust and the confidence within the sector, so much so that people from all over the world, professionals within Trinidad and Tobago as well, applying this. They want to be part of something that looks good. They want to be part of something to make a positive impact on people's lives. But when people go through, professionals go through this rigid, transparent process down to psychometric testing and what have you, all of these things these people were put through. And then to be escorted out because there's a change in government, and to be escorted out of a compound by security professionals, is that the way that we govern our country? What kind of precedents are we setting? So a future PNM government must come into government and do the same thing? We are setting a dangerous precedent in this country. And we need to respect people and respect professionals, not because they've been recruited. Anthony Smart was chairman of FCB when the PNM came into government in 2015. PNM left government in 2025, and he's still the chairman. Anthony Smart was no PNM. He was a minister, an attorney general under the NAR government, supported Kamla Persad-Bissessar. That is the record of the PNM. That is the record of the PNM. And today, all you have is the butchering of professionals because they are perceived to be there's some alignment with the PNM. Professionals. And when we treat people like that, then who's going to take charge of these positions? Who? When qualified professionals are no longer interested in taking these positions, who are going to occupy them? Who? I ask the question, who? No one. No one will be interested. And that is the reason why I've said that the behavior of this government and the behavior of this Minister of Public Utilities would have done irreversible damage to the reputation of Trinidad and Tobago and the reputation of this sector. That's all I'm prepared to say for now. Thank you. Dr. Browne? Hello.
Having a conversation with them right now concerning the increase of US prisons. Because you have no view on that because this is a saving the total amount is $3,000 and we want to have the opposition's take on this because the relationship that we have with the US, but with this beautiful bill now with more institutions. It's not enforced yet in the country, but if you can walk us through the opposition's view on it and how does that work?
Right. Well, generally, we don't form any sharp positions on the sovereign decisions and processes of another member state of the United Nations, a sovereign state such as the United States of America. We respect their right to adjust their procedures in accordance with the policies of their administration. At the same time, we must be concerned about the potential impact on nationals of Trinidad and Tobago, persons who wish to travel, and bear in mind that these costs, these increased costs, would affect various categories of individuals, those who may be proceeding on vacation, those who require medical intervention, travel on behalf of educational pursuit. There's a wide range, and therefore any increase, even if it is might be cast as a temporary measure or reimbursable, the fact that you have to take more money out of your pocket, a pocket that's, let's face it, already besieged, to take more out of it must be a concern to all of us. So it's something, particularly as it's been cast as pegged to cost of living in the future, it is likely that that type of cost will go up. It's just a reminder that Trinidad and Tobago and countries like us really should be seeking to carve out a special place with respect to our relationship with the United States of America, just given the size of the diaspora of our nation there, as well as they have a large diaspora here in Trinidad and Tobago. So that connection, that movement is already challenged by several factors. We don't want to add additional challenges with respect to finances to the ability of our people to connect and to move with relative ease. So it's in that context I would respond to your question. That's number one.
In your view, based on the attacks from the government and the independent senators, do you believe that it's affected any one of them in terms of the actual voting? Because I remember observing the Prime Minister's salary amendment bill. I remember Senator McNeish said that persons called me yesterday saying, how could you support a bill like this? I'm not too sure whether or not these persons were government ministers, members, or even advocates. But in the end, he supported it. So do you think that it's already having an effect and they have been influenced by whether voting for or against it so far?
I respond to that in this way. It is normal in a democracy, a parliamentary system, to have lobbying in advance of a matter. We've seen that in many cases in our country and elsewhere. You would advocate for a particular position. In what we're seeing now is a crossing of a clear line with respect to intimidation, with respect to bullying, with respect to actual attacks being encouraged on the independent senators, and let's face it, also on the head of state of Trinidad and Tobago. And that's a line that we should not cross. As I said earlier, it represents really an attack on our democracy and our constitution. So for a government to have embarked on that course, for a government to now be in defiance of the admonitions of a president of the Senate that they appointed with support from the chamber is really a very negative signal to the people of this country. Unfortunately, the way some people operate, when you have ministers and the PRO and other key officials behaving like that,
they take a signal and they begin to perpetuate the same type of conduct as well, online and offline. And that's the kind of cycle that can have unfortunate consequences and can result, I'm not saying it has happened, but can result in unfair pressure on the mind of an independent or any senator who might wish to cast a vote or form a position on a matter in the parliament when you would want the best possible mind resulting in the best possible position to now have individuals responding to unfair pressure. That's not how the system was designed to work. The standing orders actually prevent individuals from constraining a parliamentarian from the fair conduct of their duty. So I'm not sure why the government, this early in their term, maybe they feel they're still on honeymoon, why they would adopt this clear, defiant strategy at this point. You would have noted that right after the president of the Senate would have put his guidance on the record, the UNCPRO and now others, including ministers, have been doubling down on this matter. It could be that Parliament, it could be because Parliament has now proceeded on recess, and some of the facilities that would have been available to directly challenge and bring them to account before the Privileges Committee, etc., are simply not physically available because the Parliament is on recess, and we may reconvene in well over a month's time when the matter would not be as immediate. That could be part of their strategy, but I am convinced, we are convinced that there are enough right-thinking citizens in this country to see what is being done for what it is and to call out the government for their conduct and to hold this against them as a sign of their mentality and what they are seeking to achieve in this country. It certainly doesn't resemble their sanctimonious positions when in opposition, where at the mere drop of a hat, they would be screaming dictatorship. Well, listen, that, what we are seeing, is exactly how dictatorships operate. Any other question?
To follow up Emery's question on this, well, whether the visa security fee or visa integrity fee. CARICOM in Jamaica, do you know if that's if that's an issue that CARICOM would have taken up for like a joint position on this result?
Well, what I can say is that's a question you should be able to direct at the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, having returned from a heads meeting, except of course the Prime Minister did not attend. CARICOM normally finds positions of solidarity on matters that affect us all. And clearly that's a matter that affects us all. You would recall, even on matters related to border disputes, related to Venezuela itself, matters related to the embargo. I gave the example earlier, related to the Cuban Medical Brigade. These are matters both at the level of COFCOR and at the heads of government level that CARICOM member states tend to come together on and form positions of solidarity on. So we are waiting for the word from those who did attend with respect to the degree of examination of that particular. But to be fair, it really is a very early scenario, and further details would be forthcoming on that. Okay, thank you very much.
Akela Rum is my lover, and I don't care. So we drinking today and we drinking forever. Akela rum is my lover, and I don't care. So we drinking today and we drinking forever. Akela rum is my lover, and I don't care. So we drinking today and we drinking forever. Akela Akela Rum kill me mother, rum kill me father, rum kill me whole family. Rum kill me brother, rum kill me sister. Now it want to come and kill me, but I don't really care what people say. Oh, I'm drinking today and I'm drinking forever. Akela rum is my lover, and I don't care. So we drinking today and we drinking forever. Akela Akela We drinking by the river, cooking duck and cassava. I'm drinking with my whole posse. We singing and we liming, bottle and spoon we beating. We happy and we feeling so free, 'cause we don't really care what people say. Oh, we drinking today and we drinking forever. Akela rum is my lover, and I don't care. 'Cause we drinking today and we drinking forever. Akela Akela We drinking on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday and Sunday. We drinking in a rum shop, we drinking by the quick shop. We drinking 'cause we get the fortnight pay, and we don't really care what people say. Oh, we drinking today and we drinking forever. Akela rum is my lover, and I don't care. 'Cause we drinking today and we drinking forever. Akela Akela Akela
Sufferers don't care who migrate from where or who living in who pays. Sufferers don't care who from country. Sufferers don't care who from town.
Sufferers only want to know
where the next food coming from.
This one for all them racists. This one for the racists. Anytime you bounce up a racist and you hear them running their mouth, it have a whole set of people don't care what they're talking about. A racist is someone living happy and all their family doing well. So race talk is really not for people in the ghetto catching hell. Now tell the racists, sufferers don't care about color. Sufferers don't care about race. Sufferers don't care who migrate from where or who living in who place. Sufferers don't care who from country. Sufferers don't care who from town. Sufferers only want to hear where the next food coming from. Get up early next morning, go down in the 10 days yard. You see so much different race, so much different people line up with the ID card. Or visit my village called Talparo, where they get no water for years. So much different race, so much different color, with a bucket sit down shedding tears. Now tell the racists, sufferers don't care about color. Sufferers don't care about race. Sufferers don't care who migrate from where or who living in who place. Sufferers don't care who from country. Sufferers don't care who from town. Sufferers only want to hear what where the next food coming from. Visit the General Hospital, and I know that you would be shocked to see so much different race of people line up waiting on one dock, or pay a visit to the AIDS ward where they find no cure as yet. People don't know the race, yeah, remember the color. All they know is that they're facing death. Now tell the racists, sufferers don't care about what?
Sufferers don't care about race.
Sufferers don't care who migrate from where or who living in who place. What? Sufferers don't care who from country. What? Sufferers don't care who from town. Sufferers only want to hear
where the next food coming from.
Suffering makes us one. Tell the racists.
Sufferers don't care about color.
Sufferers don't care about race.
Sufferers don't care about race.
No, sufferers don't care who migrate from where or who living in who place. Tell the racists.
Sufferers don't care who's from country. Sufferers don't care who's from town.
Sufferers only want to hear what?
Trinidad food farming.
One more.
Sufferers don't care about color. Sufferers don't care about race.
Sufferers don't care who migrate from where or who living in who place. Tell the racists.
Sufferers don't care who's from country.
They don't care who from town.
Sufferers don't care who's from town.